think of your influential initiative or project or goal. Maybe it's that you want to get people to hire you. Maybe you're looking for a promotion. Maybe you have a conference you want to attend or some training you want to attend, and you want your department director to support you in that. You've got your idea in mind. Feel free to put that in the chat if you want to share what you're working on. Some of that might be a little confidential, but then think about, would a concrete example help you make your case that this is a great idea, whatever it is you're recommending? Would a concrete example in some way help evoke emotion in the people that are listening? So the one example that I have here on the screen is from an excerpt from a Nike shareholder report many years back. And it said, we sold our first shoes in China in 1984 when we placed 200 pairs in this little 50 square foot shop called the Friendship Store in Beijing. They sold out in 11 days. Today, the appetite for Nike products continues to grow. The brand is known and, more importantly, understood among many of the 500 million Chinese consumers under 25 years old. That's 1 billion feet that we're going after just as fast as we can. Now, I could summarize that whole paragraph by saying Nike has great brand recognition in China, right? That's basically what this says. But without that concreteness of 200 pairs of shoes in the little tiny pop-up store called the Friendship Shop, we miss that emotional connection that can be created through very concrete examples. So is there a concrete example that you could use related to your upcoming influential attempt? Vivid word choices are another one. So Steak and Shake is a regional restaurant. It was founded by Ed Kelly, who is the namesake of the Kelly School of Business, where I teach. And so a lot of us at the Kelly School follow Steak and Shake's trajectory. And some years back, they were having a really rough time. They had to, the executive team made some pretty massive decisions without even consulting the board. The board was upset about this. And so in an emergency letter to shareholders and the board, the executive team said we had no time to waste because Steak and Shake was hemorrhaging losses to the discordant tune of almost $100,000 per day. So you've got that concrete example of $100,000 per day, but you also have this vivid word choice of hemorrhaging losses. When we think about what a hemorrhage looks like, it's someone that's bleeding out, and this organization was from a financial standpoint was bleeding out. Is there vivid words that you might be able to use for your influential experience, your influential effort that you have coming up? So you've got two of these rhetorical devices, these sticky language devices now to choose from: concrete examples and vivid word choice. Alliteration is another one. So alliteration is when we put several words in a phrase that all start with the same sound. So in this Warren Buffett example, we see him saying, we enjoy the process. So you hear that P-R-O sound, process, far more than the proceeds. Process, proceeds, the beginning of those words are similar. That's alliteration. And when we use alliterative language, it brings up that emotional appeal that we know we need to be successful from an influential standpoint. Could you use alliteration to win people over? Chiasmus, this is an interesting one. One of the most popular chiasmus examples is from John F. Kennedy's speech when he says, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So what chiasmus is it's a phrase stated one way and then reversed and stated again. So here's one I learned when I was a young girl. Never let a fool kiss you. And here comes the flip, and never be fooled by a kiss. Okay, that's good wisdom, right? And it demonstrates chiasmus, a phrase said one way, then flipped to bring up this sort of emotionally evocative meaning. Do we use chiasmus in business? You bet. Here are a couple that Warren Buffett has been known to have said or have written. It's far better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price. Here comes the flip. Than a fair company, at a wonderful price. So you hear that reversal of the wording, and it kind of gives us an insight into Warren Buffett's investment strategy, or at least his acquisition strategy. And here's another one from him on his investment strategy. We simply attempt to be fearful when others are greedy. Here comes the flip. And to be greedy when others are fearful. Probably some good investing advice from Warren Buffett right there. So that's chiasmus. Maybe you could use chiasmus to influence people. Rhythmic repetition is another one of these sticky language devices that you can use. Steve Jobs used it beautifully in lots of speeches, maybe most notably in his Macworld address clear back in 2007, when he used this phrase, we've got the iPad, blah, 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 blah. We've got the iPod Nanos. Does anybody even remember Nanos? We've got the amazing new iPod Shuffle, and that we've got the, just coming up again and again and again, created this rhythm or this parallelism to his language that people found very emotionally evocative. Can you use repetition? Now, make sure that you're not just repeating yourself. The sticky language has to be rhythmic to capture that repetition piece that we're looking for. If you're just saying the same thing over and over, but not in a sequenced sort of way, that's a little different than rhythmic repetition. That's just reiterative repetition, and especially with filler words. I've been noticing my students are all making their final speeches this week, and there's a lot of them that love the phrase "you guys," which I'm trying to encourage to get out of our vocabularies because it's not very gender inclusive in its wording, but also they just say it over and over and over. And that's not the kind of repetition we're looking for at all, but rather this intentional, paralleled, rhythmic type of repetition. Simile is another one when you compare one thing that is familiar to your listener to maybe something that they're not as familiar with, or compare it to something that brings up, again, some of that emotion. So again, Warren Buffett, shareholders who lost money were like small birds who strayed into a badminton game. They were bloodied and confused. Now, of course, shareholders weren't actually bloodied and confused. Well, maybe confused, but they aren't actually birdies or birds in a badminton game. But that language is so evocative that you were likely to smile a little bit when he said that, even if you were feeling frustrated, upset, or concerned about the state of the market. This is one of my favorite examples of metaphor. Metaphor, again, being one of those comparative sticky language devices. This one was used by a gentleman named Art Silverman. And Art was the communications director for a nonprofit agency that is designed to give information to the public about nutrition and other health issues. So Art was tasked with communicating to the American public how very unhealthy movie theater popcorn was. Now, for some of you from the States, you know that, and maybe this is the case around the world, eating popcorn at the movie theater is just a part of the experience. Like we don't go to the theater just watch the movie, we go to eat our popcorn. And it's covered in butter, and it has a tremendous amount of saturated fat. In fact, it has more saturated fat, 36 grams, than you're supposed to have all day long, which I think the US daily recommended allowance is like 20 grams of saturated fat for the entire day. So Art has to convince us, and this has to be that we need to quit eating this very unhealthy movie popcorn. So he could have come in with a PowerPoint slide and some bar charts, right? And he could have said, hey, here's a bar that is 20 grams of saturated fat, and that's what you're supposed to have a day. And boom, here's the second bar on the graph. This is 36 grams. This is what a bucket of popcorn has. He could show me PowerPoint graphs all day long, and I think I'm still eating my popcorn when I go to the theater, right? So instead, what he did was he came in, ladies and gentlemen of the press, thank you for being here. And then he just says that, movie popcorn is very unhealthy. And then almost wordlessly, he gets out and from underneath the table and sits it on top of the table, a plate with bacon and eggs. And then he reaches down and he gets out more food. And from a fast food bag, he pulls out a sack. He pulls out a hamburger and some fries. And he reaches under the table again and he gets a steak and a potato with butter and sour cream on it. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, press, you friends, you could eat all of this and still have consumed fewer grams of saturated fat than in one large container of movie popcorn. Well, the press went crazy. He ended the press conference there. They went nuts. They ran headlines like lights, camera, cholesterol, and movie popcorn gets an X rating. So they were playful with it. But what was more interesting was that the movie popcorn sales in the next quarter plummeted. And so much so, in fact, that three of the major theater outlets changed the type of oil that they were cooking the popcorn in, which was largely the culprit of all of this saturated fat. So Art Silverman changed a heart-driven and emotionally connected behavior with a metaphor. I love that power of language that could happen.